This is a very intense and a step on your toes sermon today. It's one of these sermons that I believe it's a shock, and I would call it shock and awe by our Lord Jesus Christ. And he does that sometimes to get the crowd's attention so that he makes people think of what he's trying to communicate. There was an expedition that left England back in 1845 that was led by a Sir John Franklin. Amazing. I've always been interested in explorers, people who were brave to venture out to the unknown. John Franklin and 138, think about that, 138 officers and men, so there was crew, embarked from England to find the Northwest Passage across the high Canadian Arctic to the Pacific Ocean. They sailed with two ships. I guess they used to call ships barques back then, B-A-R-Q-U-E-S, a barque. And there was two ships with 3 masts each. Each sailing vessel carried an auxiliary steam engine and a 12-day supply of coal for the entire projected 2 or 3 years voyage. Think about that. They're going to be gone 2 or 3 years, and they only have enough coal for 12 days. What were they thinking? It gets worse. Instead of additional coal, according to L.P. Kerwin, another historian, each ship made room for, get this, a 1,200 volume library, a hand organ that can play 55 tunes, china place settings for officers and men, cut glass wine goblets, and sterling silver flatwares. The officers' sterling silver knives, now these are the officers, they had forks and spoons were particularly interesting. The silver was of ornate Victorian design, very heavy at the handles and richly patterned. Engraved on the handles were the individual officers' initials and family crests. The expedition carried no special clothing for the Arctic, only the uniforms of Her Majesty's Navy. The ship set out on the high seas amid enormous glory and fanfare. 2 months later, a British whaling captain met the two ships in Lancaster Sound. He reported back to England on the high spirits of the officers and men. He was the last European to see any of them alive. Years later, civilization learned that many of the Inuit Eskimos had hazarded across the tableau, the frozen tableau, involving various still living or dead members of the Franklin expedition. Some had glimpsed, for instance, men pushing and pulling a wooden boat across the ice. Some had found at a place called Starvation Cove, this boat, or a similar one, and the remains of 35 men who had been dragging it. At a place called Terra Bay, the Inuits found a tent on the ice, and in it 30 bodies were frozen. At Simpson Strait, some Indians had seen a very odd sight. The pack ice pierced by the 3 protruding wooden masts of the ship. For 20 years, search parties have recovered skeletons from all over the frozen sea. Accompanying one clump of frozen bodies were place settings of sterling silver flatware engraved with officers' initials and family crest. I guess they didn't throw them away. I thought they would have another meal. Another search party found 2 skeletons in a boat on a sledge. They had hauled the boat 65 miles. With the 2 skeletons were some chocolate, some guns, some tea, and a great deal of table silverware. Many miles south of these 2 were another skeleton alone. This was a frozen officer. The skeleton was in the uniform, trousers, and jacket of a fine blue cloth, edged with silk braid, with sleeves slashed and bearing 5 covered buttons each. Over this uniform, the dead man had worn a blue greatcoat with a black silk handkerchief. That was the Franklin expedition. Totally unprepared for what they faced. In contrast, from 1945, fast forward to 1910. In a London newspaper appeared this Men Wanted ad. Read this. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe, return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. You think anyone would respond to that ad? I don't remember the exact number, but I think they had 250 respond to that ad. But they only took, I think, 35 on that ship. That was the boat called the Endurance. A fellow by the name of Ernest Shackleton decided he wanted to make an expedition across Antarctica in the South Pole. But this crew, 35 men, went prepared. They had everything, the clothing, the equipment. They only had one ship. They had sleds and stuff, and they brought, I understand they had 30 dogs, sled dogs, or 32 sled dogs they brought with them to go across, to carry the stuff to go across. They had everything. The sad story, you can watch this on, I think, the History Channel and maybe the National Geographic. I read the book years ago called The Endurance. Amazing story. They got stuck halfway through, and the ice that was apparently water at one time froze in on the boat and crushed the boat to smithereens, and it sank. They had to drag their whaleboats over the tundra for days and days and years. In fact, just recently, I think it was on National, I watched a special, they have gone back and they have found the Endurance, and they sent deep sea submarines down, and I think they're going to try to bring it back. They wanted to find out. The interesting thing is those 32 dogs didn't make it. They had to eat them. All their food left. They did not lose one man on this trip. Many of them lost toes, hands, fingers, frostbite. They sent one man in the whaleboat to go down to the south part where the last station, the whaling station was before you would go to Antarctica. Unbelievable miracle. He made it, and they came back and rescued these people. See, they counted the cost, and it cost them dearly. We're going to be looking at the cost of discipleship today. Very serious passage. This is one of the most serious sermons I think Jesus preached while he was on the earth. It's called Count the Cost, Bear the Cross. See, in this passage today, Jesus asked this of us this morning. He asked us to count the cost to follow him. He says, if you truly love me, he asks, this is what it will look like. If we truly love the Lord, this is what it should look like. First, your love for me will be seen as hate for others. This is quite a passage. I remember the first time reading this. I was a young man, wasn't married yet, serious about the Lord, and I believe it was this message that my pastor at the church in Charleston Harbor Bible Church in Charleston, South Carolina, preached this and gave an invitation at the end of the sermon for people who would want to seriously pick up their cross and follow Jesus to be his disciple, knowing what the cost would be. And I went down forward. I was, I think, the only one that went down in that church that day. And I'm here today, still carrying the cross. Look at verse 26. We're down at verse 20. We're going to be dealing with 25 to 35. But look at 26. Let's look at 25 first. Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them. Now, in context, remember last week, we talked about Jesus telling the parable of this great banquet and feast. And we're going to mention a couple of times, he said, go into the highways and the byways and the hedges and compel everyone to come so that here's the key, so that my house may be full. That's our Lord's heart. That's his desire, that his house will be full with people who will come and accept Christ. That is the heart of God right there. If you want to ask the question, if I can give God something that he would want, if I can give him a birthday gift or a present, what would I give him? He wants souls, people to be in his house forever. We're going to talk about that. But notice verse 26. Now, by the way, the cross is just down the road. The shadow of the cross is Jesus is facing Jesus from this time forward. He knows that he has a little bit of time left, and he's when he's going to fulfill his mission. And so he gets more and more strict and serious in his preaching. But notice 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Wow. Did he say what? What did he say? Did he say that? That you need to hate your mother, your father, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sisters, even your own life? He said, what is that? The word hate is a very powerful word here. Now, some people have tried to accuse Jesus of and trying to say, oh, what kind of God would do this? The word hate in Greek means to hate and detest. But it's not the kind of hate that we would think that you would want to kill or murder your enemy. It's not a bloodthirsty hate that your hate was. What it means is to love less. Formerly hate. It means a Semitic comparison refers to a divine choice. It signifies loving less. And in rabbinical teaching, it regarded preferential treatment of the teacher over the father. In other words, if you follow the rabbi was actually more important than your father and mother in rabbinical teachings. And so what Jesus says, your love for me will look like hate for others. I'm not saying he's not necessarily saying you hate your mother and father like with a hatred. He says your love for them is less than your love for me. Your love in comparison will be like hate. Very interesting thing when you think about it. Jesus does not here mean that one must hate his father and mother of necessity, for Matthew 15:14 proves the opposite. In Matthew 15:14, he confronts the Pharisees saying, you don't honor your mother and father. They were ripping their parents off by saying the money and their inheritance, they would dedicate it to the temple and they wouldn't take care of their parents. And Jesus blatantly says, you're breaking one of the 10 commandments. One of the 10 commandments is to honor your father and mother. So he's not talking about breaking the fourth, I think it's the fifth commandment. No, he's not saying that. It's only where the element of choice comes, as it sometimes does, when the father or mother opposes Christ, then one must not hesitate. When I came to Christ and came home and started sharing with my family, my mother and father, man, I never got so much flack. There was so much hatred for Jesus. Oh, they wanted the Jesus of their own creation, the Jesus that they molded in their own image, an idol, not the Jesus of the Bible. And when I did that, I says, wow, Lord, my own family. And I realized my love for Christ must be so strong that all other love is like hatred in comparison. You understand that? Mm-hmm. Our love for Christ must be so strong that all other love is like hatred in comparison. In fact, we must hate our own lives and be willing to bear the cross after him. Warren Wiersbe said that, one of my favorite authors. Even his own life. That means, are you willing to be a martyr for Jesus? He's saying, are you willing to lay down your life? That's what he's asking us. Martyrdom would remain a possibility to the Christian. And not to be courted, but not to be shunned. Love for Christ takes precedence over even the elemental instinct of self-preservation. John Phillips, another author, said that. Wow. We know that probably, 11 out of the 12 apostles were martyred. John died probably on the Isle of Patmos or in old age, but all the rest were martyred. They picked up their cross. Another commentator, a fellow by the name of Alfred Plummer, points out Jesus as often states a principle in a startling way and leaves his hearers to find out the qualifications. He's startling us by this. And we're like, oh, whoa, man, that's harsh. I don't know if I can handle that. And the question he raises here in this passage is, what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? We need to consider this. What is a disciple? A disciple is a learner. The basic meaning is a learner. Someone who learns. One who attaches himself or herself to a teacher in order to learn a trade or a subject. Perhaps our nearest modern equivalent would be apprenticeship. We're familiar with that, an apprentice. One who learns by watching and doing and assisting a master. The word disciple was the most common name for the followers of Jesus Christ and is used 264 times in the Gospels and in the book of Acts. Very strong word. Jesus seems to make a distinction here, which is important. There's a distinction between salvation and discipleship. Salvation is open to all who will come by faith, while discipleship is for believers willing to pay a price. That's for a believer who wants to step up and step out in a cost of discipleship that's very meaningful. Salvation means, Jesus wants as many sinners saved as possible. That's the phrase we saw, that my house may be full. But he cautions us not to take the discipleship lightly. And in 3 parables he gave, he made it clear that there is a price to pay. There's a price to pay with discipleship. This is why it's very powerful. The second question, he says, is your love for me will be seen as death to self by bearing your cross. If you really mean this. John Phillips, again, the commentator, says, a cross? Look at verse 27. Read verse 27 with me. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Who is not willing to carry his own cross? Every one of us is asked by the Lord, will you be willing to pick up your cross and follow me as I pick up my cross? John Phillips says, a cross? The cross was the very symbol of Roman oppression and cruelty. It's horrible. It was like the gallows of their day. It was an instrument of unbelievable suffering and shame. Nothing about the cross was glamorous. It was the very symbol of a curse. In fact, Deuteronomy 21:23 says, cursed is anyone that hangs on a tree, meaning a cross, to have that. Wow. He said, he who does not hoist up, now this would be like a paraphrase today, if we would put it in our modern day colloquialism of death penalty. He who does not hoist up his gallows or his electric chair and follow me cannot be my disciple. We don't crucify people today. At least not in civilized countries. They have crucified Christians, by the way, and it still goes on today in Africa, in all these Islamic countries. Horrible. You see, discipleship is a series of deaths, perpetual dying. Disciples follow Christ on a path of self-denial. Whoops, I went back too far. On a path of self-denial. Disciples embrace suffering as a part of life. As Paul prayed, Paul said this in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10 and 11. This was his philosophy of ministry. He said that I may know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. And so somehow I may attain to the resurrection of the dead. Wow. That's quite a calling. Wow. The disciple's life is not easy. C.S. Lewis had it right. He said the Christian way, C.S. Lewis said, is different. Christ says, give me all. I don't want so much of your time, so much of your money, and so much of your work. I want you. I have not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it. No half measures are any good. I don't want to cut off a branch here and a branch there. I want to have the whole tree down. I don't want to drill the tooth or crown it or stop it, but to have it out. Hand over the whole natural self, all the desires which you think innocent as well as the ones you think wicked, the whole outfit. Jesus turned to his multitudes and preached a sermon that deliberately thinned out the ranks. Guess what? I bet you that crowd was pretty crowded that day when he heard the sermon. And all of a sudden, it's like what we have here. Wow, where did everyone go? What happened? They didn't had a roast in the oven or something, they had to go home? No, it was convicting. Because he was preaching on discipleship and discipleship. It's interesting. No one stuck around. He made it clear that when it comes to a personal discipleship, he is more interested in quality than quantity. That's interesting. In the matter of saving souls, he wants his house to be filled, we said. But in the matter of personal discipleship, he wants only those who are willing to pay the price. The question is for us, are we willing to pay that price? Follow Jesus that way? The third thing Jesus says, your love for me will be seen in how you order your life. Wow. And this is what he says here. Look at verse 28 through 32. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost, or maybe your version, count the cost, to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and it is not able to finish, all who observe it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Ha ha. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000 men, or else, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. You get it? Here's the issue. We need to count the cost. Jesus said, I want you, before you make any decisions here, friends, any people out in the crowd, I'm going to ask you to pick up your cross. I want you to count the cost. Remember, old Sir John Franklin didn't count the cost when he went to the Arctic in North Pole. Ernest Shackleton did, even though he had rough times. But in discipleship as a Christian, you need to count the cost. The word count the cost, or calculate, you might have, very interesting Greek word. Calculate means calculate, to add up, to cipher. It's to kind of sit down and figure the whole thing out, to calculate so that you understand what is all involved. Interesting. Figure out, come to understand. A.T. Robertson, a great Greek scholar, he says this is a verb found only here and in Revelation 13:18 in the New Testament. It says a stone which was used back in the days of this Greek word. They used to use a stone that was used in voting or counting. So you would have boxes, we have ballots today. They used a stone. And they must have had stones that put in a box for this candidate and that. They used a stone. And the word, they used the word, and then in the Latin, calculate is from the Latin word calculus. And you know what calculus means in Latin? A pebble. To vote was to cast a pebble. Luke has Paul using deposit a pebble for casting his vote. Acts 26:10, he uses that. And by the way, the Revelation 13:18 is the verse talking about the Antichrist. It says calculate his number. 666. You know that? In other words, you need to count the cost of what it's going to mean for you to take the mark of the beast. Now, I don't believe we'll have to face that question or that decision, because I believe Jesus is going to take you home. But there's going to be a world of people maybe even right now, who are going to have to someday make a decision. They're going to have to count the cost, where they're going to follow the Antichrist as their Lord God and follow him and pick up their cross. Sad. You see this whole illustration of towers. This is a tower called Bar Saba Monastery Tower. It's in Israel. It's an illustration of a tower that was never finished. It's like, oh, wow, nice. Looks pretty good. Looked like it started good. Didn't work. Didn't finish. All throughout Israel are towers. This one's called the Watchtower at Yad HaShaman. Now, this one's finished. Most of these towers you see in Israel were towers that were put up in grape orchards, olive gardens, and mostly put in pastures where sheep were. The Tower of Edel is a place where Jesus was born outside Bethlehem, and shepherds would go and they would look. They probably didn't have telescopes back then, but they would look for wild animals that would come in, wolves, lions, whatever, to come in to attack. But many of these, you can see, maybe weren't finished. A number of these are all around that were not complete. And here's an example, back again, where paying the price, counting the cost, it's a price to pay. And I read from the Revelation, whether they're going to use a barcode or whatever, QR codes in the future, there's going to be a mark on the hand or the forehead that Antichrist is going to demand everyone to take. They will neither buy nor sell without this mark or this thing, an in-chip, or maybe a chip implanted. We don't know. Could be. But when it is, it means total devotion and obedience and worshiping of him as God. That's scary. Jesus says the fourth thing, your love for me will be seen in your disregard for life's possessions. Wow. Man, that's quite a cost. Look at verse 33. So then, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. What? So then, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. That's where many of these monastic groups, whether you be a nun or a priest or a monk, they would call it a vow of poverty. They get this from this verse. That to be a monk, a priest, a brother, Franciscan, whatever, a nun, that you had to take a vow that you're giving up all your possessions for the Lord, which is fine. But it's not just a religious, it is a heartfelt decision that your life is going to do this. And by the way, this word, interesting, who does not give up all, who doesn't, it actually says who does, literally means who does not say goodbye to everything he owns. I like that. Are you willing to say goodbye to all your possessions? Are you willing to say that? Goodbye. That's why Jesus many times talked about it's harder for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle, than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, than for a rich man to enter heaven. Riches are one of the most damning things with people. They can't give up those things. There's no way in the world. And I remember to make this decision, Lord, I'm willing. When I went forward, I knew that maybe God would use me to go to the mission field. I wanted to go anywhere. And even if it meant going to some crazy country in the middle of the jungle and have nothing, I was willing to do that for Jesus. That commitment was in my heart. And when I met Shelley, I wanted to know if she had that same commitment. Together we would serve. And that's what Jesus is asking us. Then there's a fifth consideration Jesus gives us. Your love for me will be seen in your strength of your alkalinity. What in the world is that? The strength of your alkalinity? That's salt. We're talking about salt here. We all know the Dead Sea in Israel. It's called the Salt Sea. The Dead Sea, the salt. I've never been to Israel, but I know many people that go, and usually the Dead Sea is on the itinerary of a tour. And people get the opportunity to go swim in the Dead Sea. And everyone that does it, The most amazing thing is this: the salt content of the salt sea is so high that you can't sink. You know, you might not be able to float in water in a pool. Oh, like, try to stay afloat or tread water. When you go to the Dead Sea, you just blow back and you're floating, man. You're like the dead man on the water in the Dead Sea. In fact, nothing lives in the Dead Sea. No fish. It's dead. But they now, you know that there's factories. There's a big problem in Israel. One of their political and vote on is there's a bunch of companies that want to build factories on the edge of the Dead Sea to make minerals, cosmetics, ointments. Have you ever been to Ollie's? Ollie's sells a body wash and a soap and a shampoo and oils that come from the Dead Sea. They're called Dead Sea something. I forget the title. They got a little pump. And I use a body wash soap. And it's made from the Dead Sea water. Now this is some of these companies, they're making a haul. Some believe there's some additional purposes in this stuff. Someday God is going to rejuvenate this water, and all the water from Jerusalem's temple of God, Jesus, is going to flow into this sea again, and it's going to be filled with fish. But interesting, Jesus says here in the last couple of verses, therefore, salt is good. Now he's talking about salt. We are going to be the salt. We are the salt of the earth. Therefore, salt is good. But even if salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless, either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And so what he's saying to us here is the Lord wants us to be the salt of the earth. To commit and carry a cross to follow Jesus as his disciple means you're going to step up and be salt. So the first thing we see about salt was a valued item. Now, today, it's one of the cheapest things you can buy in a store. Oh, buy me a thing of salt. I don't even know, it's $1. Salt is amazing, but salt was a valued item in that day. In fact, part of a soldier's salary pay was given in salt, and he put it in his pouch. That's how powerful and important salt was to carry. The word salt, interesting, in the Greek and the word salary are related. Salt and salary. Hence, you ever heard the saying, he's not worth his salt? You're not worth his salt. You're not worth it. Or his weight in salt. Interesting. Salt is also a preservative. Salt preserves. Before refrigeration, before the day when we could refrigerate and had Freon and did all the freezers and Freon, they would salt pack fish, salt pack food. You deep jerk everything or dry them and salt them. That was the way that our pioneers and our ancestors used to preserve their meats in salt. And by the way, we are a preservative. We as Christians are the salt of the earth. We preserve our society from going corrupt and evil and corrode. By us being in the world, we preserve the world and its morals, its ethics, keeping the laws of God. And people know that, and they're reminded of Christians, and they hate us because we are salt. Oh, you Christians, you don't do anything. You Christians, you're spoil sports. You're party poopers. Every party has a pooper. That's why we've invited you, party pooper. Because we're salt. But guess what? When that salt is gone, when the rapture of the church, when God comes back in the twinkling of an eye and takes all the believers, guess what? This society worldwide is going to corrode fast. You know how fast things go bad. I mean, you leave something out in your refrigerator, put something, stink. I mean, you got wherever you store your potatoes. We found the rotten potatoes are you get in there. That's what happens when you don't preserve. Salt is also a purifying agent. Salt, it's an antiseptic that makes things cleaner. That salt is in a lot of things. It's a cleaner. It may sting when it touches the wound, but it helps to kill infection. It will kill the germs on spot. You don't think about that, but that's one thing you can do real quick. If you have nothing else, put salt on it. And God, by the way, we go back to that, because it's a purifying, we being present in this world help to purify our society. If anything about today, about our trunk or treat and tracts, if there's one thing, regardless of what the results are, that's with God, we are a purifying agent out there when we give out stuff. Yes, we are. We are a preserving. People will come and they are going to realize that, oh, there's something different about us, because these people are the salt of the earth. They don't know whether it's good or not, but guess what? They're going to desire to need salt. And so that's what's happened. Also, salt sustains moisture in humans in very dry climate. It's important to take salt. You know this whole Gatorade fad we go through? And then you watch any football game, you see, it's incredible. Gatorade was invented down at University of Florida, where the Gators play. I'm trying to think. It's University of Florida, down there in Gainesville. There was a man that they've invented that. Some chemist or in their professor invented Gatorade. You see, salt is sodium chloride. And they invented this drink, which was a fruit drink, originally orange flavored or lemon flavored, with this sodium chloride mixture. And when you do drink Gatorade, you can taste the salty sodium taste in it. But what it does was they found out, they gave it to all their athletes, all their football players, and they found out these guys sweating, pouring out sweat in a Florida climate, that this helped retain the fluids. And it is seen everywhere. I went to my granddaughter's football game. They're cheerleaders. My older and younger, they cheerlead for two different age groups. Well, we went, 2 weekends ago to watch them. I had a ball watching these little kids. Because we didn't play football that small. I mean, these little kids, like in grammar school, they're playing. They got these big helmets on where they could bump into a tree and just fall down. They wouldn't get hurt. It's weird. But they had these little kids on the team who were the Gatorade kids. And they had the bottles of Gatorade running like as if they were pro football players. And I was watching these little kids running to give the Gatorade to people to drink and squirting them out. And so while they're out in the thing, these two kids, I laughed my head off. The two kids that were the Gatorade boys got into a water fight. They squirted each other. And they're having a ball. And all of a sudden, one of the coaches says, "Boys, that's not for playing. It's for the..." I'm sorry. I laughed my head off. Kids will be kids. Salt sustains moisture in humans every day, which is very important. And so that's important for us. Also, salt gives flavor. Our presence in this world gives flavor to people, whether they want to admit it or not. Flavor. We enhance things. Your presence in your workplace, in your neighborhood, wherever you are, will enhance the environment, whether you know it or not. And interesting. This was a quote from Lloyd Ogilvie. Lloyd Ogilvie was a chaplain for the U.S. Congress in the early days. He wrote a book called The Autobiography of God, which I have never read, which I want to try to read. It sounds good. He's quite a guy. I have a couple of his books. He's Presbyterian. He said that saline saints bring zest and gusto to life, like salt. They bring out the best of the flavor of living. You know what salt does to things. Now, I haven't gotten to putting salt on my watermelon, but I know people that love salting their watermelon, and they say it makes it sweeter. I know one thing, I love hard-boiled eggs, but I love hard-boiled egg with salt. I love salt on things. My father-in-law, Shelley's dad, he loved salt so much, he had high blood pressure. They was always giving him the stuff. You have to have this fake salt. He said, "Keep that stuff. I can't eat that. That's not real." Yes, but it brings out the flavor of living. We give zest and gusto to life. We should bring out the best flavor of living to people. And when we are gone, they're going to see it. Salt makes people thirsty. That's one good thing. It makes you drink more. That's one of the things salt does. It makes you drink more. Salt makes people thirsty. By our character and conduct, we ought to make others thirsty for the Lord Jesus Christ and the salvation that He alone gives. Now here's that fake salt on the left. New salt or no. My father-in-law was supposed to, he had this. Dad, you got to eat that salt. No, get that away from me. That ain't salt. He hated it. Our modern salt today is pure and does not lose its flavor. Our salt doesn't lose its flavor. But in Jesus' day, it was impure and can lose its flavor, especially if it came in contact with the earth. Once the saltiness was gone, there was no way to restore it. And the salt was thrown out into the street to be walked on. When a disciple loses his Christian character, when a Christian loses his integrity, his virtue, he is good for nothing. Isn't that interesting? He's good for nothing. And will eventually be walked on by others and bring disgrace to Christ. We've known people who profess Christ and fall into sin or something that becomes public, and especially if they were public figures, they're maligned for the rest of their life. They can't go on because they're worth nothing. They're going to be walked on by people. The world knows hypocrites, and he knows how we Christians should be living. Remember Lot's wife? That story? Angels of God took Lot, his wife, and his children and tried to get him out of Sodom and Gomorrah because God was going to rain down fire and brimstone to destroy that city. And he says, get out, get out. And he made the command, says, do not turn back and look. What do you mean that? What do you mean turn back and look? And they ran to a city near them called Zoar. But who turned back? And the idea was more than just a glance. I think it revealed Lot's wife's heart. She loved the world. She loved what she had there. She didn't mind living among the sin and the filth and the scum of what Sodom and Gomorrah did. She turned around, the Bible says, she turned into a pillar of salt. Wow, it's kind of weird, isn't it? But here's the big $100 million question. Dare to be a disciple. This is important. This is Jesus' sermon. Warren Wiersbe said this, discipleship is serious business. If we are not true disciples, then Jesus cannot build the tower and fight the war. Wow. There is always an if in connection with discipleship. If. That's what Oswald Chambers said. There's always an if in connection with discipleship. And it implies that we need not be disciples unless we like. In other words, unless we want to be. Do you want to be? The choice is ours. There is never any compulsion. Jesus doesn't coerce us. He doesn't come and grab you by the hand and twist your arm and say, come and be my disciple. It's a question and an answer on our volition, our will. We have to make the decision. There is only one way of being a disciple, and that is by being devoted to Jesus. If we tell Jesus that we want to take up our cross and follow him as his disciples, then he wants us to know exactly what we're getting into. That's what this passage is telling us. That's why it's a shock factor. My love for you has got to look like hate for others? I don't know, but you want me to give up everything? Wow. He wants no false expectancy. He wants no illusions, no bargains. He wants to use us as stones for building his church, soldiers for battling his enemies, and salt for bettering his world. And he is looking for quality, not quantity. After all, whoops, I pushed the wrong button. I always do that. He's looking for quality. After all, he was on his way to Jerusalem when he spoke these words. And look what happened to him there. He does not ask us to do anything for him that he has not already done for us. To some, Jesus says, you cannot be my disciples. Why? Because they will not forsake all for him. They will not bear shame. They will not bear his reproach on them. And they will let their love for him, he will not let their love for him control him. And basically, they're losers. We're the losers. So the question today, as we close up, will you be his disciple? More than just learning. A lot of people come to church, Bible study, they're in small groups, they listen to their favorite shows on TV. You know, they're Charles Stanley, they're David Jeremiah's, and whoever your favorites are. But that doesn't mean you're a disciple unless you're willing to pick up your cross. Be willing to die to self. Follow Jesus and share in his reproach, and his dying. To give up all. To make your love for him look like hatred for the world. Wow. Will you be his disciples? Again, as we close, I want to play a song. I have decided to follow Jesus. And in your heart today, if you have decided to be his disciple and want to say, why don't you take the courage, and it's by faith, because you not know what the future he has for you. Not all of us may die. Some people go become a martyr in a foreign country. Never thought that would happen. You don't know what we have, but you trust Jesus to follow him and say, Lord, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. I don't care what happens. In the quiet of this song, as we hear these words, maybe call out in prayer to the Lord and say, Lord, today, Lord, I have decided to follow you, which means I'm going to pick up my cross and follow you and be willing to give up all for you.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow turning